It's never too late to kind of access the creative part of you that is your soul.
Hello and welcome back after the summer break. We hope you've had a wonderful few months and we're thrilled to kick off September with a fresh season of inspiring conversations.
This podcast is all about spotlighting household names and trailblazers as we interview people whose creativity has had an impact in Britain and beyond.
Familiar names and faces candidly share their stories, honest insights including their highs and lows, as well as invaluable words of inspiration.
We are delighted to bring you our next guest on the Global Indian Creatives podcast. He is none other than Sanjeev Bhaskar OBE, who first hit our screens in Goodness Gracious Me. The groundbreaking sitcom revolutionised the 90s through its Asian representation, but his path into TV was anything but straightforward. In fact, a simple coin toss played a role in putting him in front of commissioners.
In this interview, Sanjeev opens up with depth and humour, reflecting on the twists and turns of his journey, the philosophy behind his work and life, and the meaning of creativity that's carried him through. Awarded an OBE in 2005 for his contributions to the arts, and also the Chancellor of the University of Sussex, we bring you his story. Let's start with Goodness Gracious Me. That was a first of its kind, and it put British Asians on the map on telly. How did that all come about?
Meera and Kulwinder were working on The Real McCoy, which is the black sketch show that preceded Goodness Gracious Me. And Anil Gupta, producer of Goodness Gracious Me, was a script editor on that show. And Meera had always badgered Anil to say, look, we've got so many stories of our own, so many characters and so many sketches and so many experiences of our own that we really have enough to fill a series. And the thing that I think made, Asian-based art, if you like, in this country difficult was the lack of accessibility, mainly through language, I think. Language and culture, because if you were Black Caribbean, then at least English was your basic language. And I think that the British public had been used to seeing Black superstars from America. And so having to kind of then accept Black British artists wasn't a huge leap, whereas the Asian lot were very, very different. And so particularly on television, they were either very minor characters or characters of fun. And so they were the butt of the joke. The accent was kind of not cool, whereas Jamaican patois was pretty cool. And so when it came to Goodness Gracious Me, and Anil had these conversations with Meera, he said, yeah, that's fine, but where are the actors who can do it? So I was at university with Nitin Sawhney, and when we were at university, we both used to talk about the fact that there was nobody out there expressing our experiences of being both British and Asian, so why don't we do something? And I said to him, well, look, if we combine music, obviously, which he's a genius at, and comedy, then what we will be is unpredictable, because one of the things that I think held us all back were the preconceptions of who we were. And that was based on social norms of the time, and particularly on television, was kind of how we had been represented. And so when we did this at university, we just said, okay, what we'll do is we'll do a show whereby, I'll do a sketch and it'll be a kind of Asian character, a shopkeeper. There was a shopkeeper character that I used to do. And then Nitin would play a flamenco piece. And then we'd do a blues number, and then we'd do a sketch together. And then Nitin would play some sort of jazz piano. And then we sang a song in Italian. And I said, the thing with that is nobody will be able to predict what comes next. Some years later, I gave him a call. I worked in marketing at that time. I rang Nitin up and I said, well, there's still nobody out there expressing our experiences. So should we do something? So we called ourselves the Secret Asians, bad pun. And we did a show called Papa Gum Preach, which is an even worse pun, and put it on at a theatre. We were there for 2 weeks. We thought we'll be there for 2 weeks. Nina I'd met on the kind of very, very minor fledgling comedy circuit. And so I said to Nina, do you want to do warm up for us and maybe do a couple of sketches with us? And she said, yeah. So she did about 10 minutes of material on her own and then did 2 or 3 sketches with us. And our show was about, I guess, an hour and a half or something. And unbeknownst to us, we got a rave review in Time Out by Bonnie Greer. And suddenly we were sold out. And we didn't know why, because for the first 3 or 4 days, we had like 12 people in the audience. And then suddenly it was 50. So as I then later found out, Anil and another guy from the BBC got one of these flyers. And they said, look, this is Asian comedy thing. Secret Agents, Pop It On Preach. It sounds really crap, but shall we go and check it out? Or shall we go to the pub? And apparently they flipped a coin, and luckily it came up heads. And so they came to see the show. And after the show said to me, look, we're thinking of doing a sketch show, and this is the kind of material we're looking for. And so at that point in the show that Nitin and I were doing, we had the Bungra Muffin characters, check it, man, innit, like totally cool. We had those guys and the Indian guru who knows nothing about Eastern mysticism and just wants to fleece Westerners, both of which those characters then ended up in, goodness gracious me. And that was it. My life changed at that point immeasurably. The BBC initially said to us, Asian comedy, is that a thing? We didn't even know that was a thing. So they gave us £10,000 and a week to come up with a live show. The BBC bods came to see that. They saw the reaction of the audience and said, okay. We said, great. Can we do a telly show then? And they said, no, you can do a radio pilot. So we did a radio pilot, then got the radio show, and then said, can we do telly? And they said, well, no, you can have a TV pilot. So we did a TV pilot, and then that did well enough for them to give us a series. Suddenly, the reviews were good and the reactions were great. And we ended up doing 3 series. And
me and my family were sitting there on a Friday night at 9 o'clock watching.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing to me that it's held the affection to date that it has. And the thing was also, everyone realized that when the figures came in, it couldn't have been just Asians who were watching it. And I think that crossover strength, I think, was the first time that everybody realized that we could be mainstream. Our aim was to be mainstream. Our aim was not to be niche. I think that one of the really good decisions we made, actually, I said to Anil, don't subtitle anything. Unless the subtitle is the joke, don't subtitle, because let people know by the context, let people find an Asian person and ask them what it means. So we never subtitled anything, which is why then Shuddies went into the Oxford English Dictionary. People know what that means now. And it was by context. So I think that was one really good decision we made. The other thing was that we said, look, the urge is to express your politics. And so a lot of people express their politics first and their comedy second. It's kind of, what political point can we make? And we were the other way around. We said, let's be funny and the politics will come out of that. Watching some of the sketches back, I have slightly mixed feelings, because on the one hand, a lot of the sketches still hold up. And that's great because they're still relevant. And then that's quite depressing that they're still relevant, that we haven't moved on from the generational thing or the sexism or the racism. If those sketches still feel relevant, that means those elements are still there.
There's so much to unpack in all of that. I suppose one thing, just to try and go as much as we can on your journey, is that you were in marketing and in the corporate space. You've clearly had creativity running through you the whole time, though. And you've been an absolute pioneer, from everything you've just said. You were one of the first having those conversations about even, something like subtitles. Why was it so important to you to make all those right decisions? Where did that all come from? Because that is hard to tell commissioners, no, we're doing it like this and we want to be on TV, and to push for those elements. And then also, why comedy?
Okay, gosh. Well, comedy, because I think it's like hiding little kids' vegetables in the pasta. I think you can hide the points you want to make within comedy. And whilst people are laughing at the joke, they've accepted the point. They have to have thought about it, even if it's kind of subconsciously, it'll be in their head somewhere. So comedy is really powerful for that, because I think that if you feel that you're being lectured, there's a bit of you that switches off. And also, and this was a point that Anil made actually, was that we hadn't seen many Asian characters on screen, and the ones we had seen were generally pretty stereotypical. And he said a sketch show was a brilliant way of introducing 200 Asian characters. And so suddenly something like The Accent, which had just been about being ridiculed, suddenly there were also 30 different Asian accents of varying kinds. You know, it was pulling it away from all of those preconceptions that already existed. Interestingly, in the 3 series that we did on TV, we never did a sketch about an Asian shopkeeper. We didn't need to. Again, it was about the unexpected. I think in terms of the right decisions, you don't know whether they're right decisions. You know, you make the decisions with the best intentions, and they either work out well or they don't, or you learn from them. Certainly for me, you know, the power of utter ignorance. You know, I'd not been in this world. I didn't know what a commissioner was, but there was a strong feeling about how we wanted to come across. And also, it's a strange thing. If you feel psychologically, if you feel you have nothing to lose, that's when you take risks. And so creatively, I had nothing to lose. I, you know, hated marketing. This is something I always wanted to do. And also, I think me and Nitin had done stuff on stage to an audience. So we had an idea of what worked. And then it was about then translating that to either radio or to television, which is the bits I didn't know about. But, you know, the fundamental element of the sketch, I think I had a pretty good idea about.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And sort of, as Anita rightly sort of said earlier, you know, you've had a lot of creative input. So there's 2 angles to it. One is your talent in acting, and secondly, writing the script and having, which I guess has quite a lot of influence. I wonder, as a second generation Asian, you know, your parents moved from India to UK. How did you convince them that you wanted to be an actor?
That's a really good question. It was by systematically bringing their expectations to such a low level that I could have done anything at that point. So I wanted to be an actor or a writer or involved in this world, probably from about the age of 5. And when I was about 5, some uncle came round and said, "Well, Sanjeev, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Actor." And my dad said, "It's pronounced doctor." And like, you know, a lot of that generation going into medicine or engineering, accountancy, and law, those were the big 4. And because I'd failed at that, I took the A levels that my parents wanted me to take, which was an utter disaster. So, you know, maths, physics, and economics were my A levels. And then, you know, the work stuff just wasn't working out. I just thought, I've got nothing to lose. I've always wanted to do this. So I'll give it a couple of years. So by that stage, I think they were just happy that I was out of the house, because I had to move back home as well. I'm Chancellor of the University of Sussex. It's one of the things I say to the students on a regular basis, which is, don't define yourself by a bad day or a bad week or a bad month or even a bad year. That's not who you are. I had a bad decade once, but I came out of it. And so it is all about, you know, who you are is always what you do next. Always. It's not just what happened to you. And also I was really lucky that, you know, Goodness Gracious for Me was the first thing I did. And it was suddenly considered a success. So even though my parents thought, well, this is ridiculous, their friends were telling them that their kids were watching it and they were watching it. And also it's a weird thing. It's kind of, I think it's deep within the kind of Asian psyche. And I have thought about this quite a bit. Fame, for want of a better term, is the only thing that trumps medicine, law, accountancy, and engineering. I think because, especially in the subcontinent, community is kind of based on extended family. And there are so many people that anybody who gets their head above the parapet, who's not kind of the norm, is considered a success in some way. Suddenly they're known. And so I think for my family, it was that. Suddenly all their friends whose kids had become doctors or were training to, you know, chartered accountant and the rest of the big 4, suddenly it was, oh, well, everybody knows what Mr. and Mrs. Bhaskar son is doing. And so I think at that point, they kind of went, yeah, all right, we'll let it go then. I do often think, actually, when I've played a doctor, whether I'm just taunting them, whether on screen just going, could have been this for real.
Could have been.
But not that they've ever said anything.
Yeah, what do they say now? Because you're in such a different place now. And you've talked about, having a bad decade. You're now doing Unforgotten. You've done The Sandman, Paddington 2, movies, Netflix, dramas. And you have moved away really from trying to move away from the stereotype in comedy to actually just being British and Asian. How has that felt for you personally?
I remember doing a workshop thing at the National Theatre years ago where they got about 20, 30 maybe Asian actors and did a sort of 2-day Shakespeare workshop. They put everyone in a circle and they went around and said, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? And almost everybody kind of said, I don't want to be seen as Asian. I want to be seen just as an actor. I can play any part and, I want to do movies and I want to be, and it got to me. And again, ignorance really was my friend at this point. And I said, can I just say, I have no problem being Asian. I am, my name is, and I look it. And in terms of what I want to do, I want to be able to do theatre and radio and TV and film. And I'd like to do documentaries. I'd like to do it all. I understand better now that viewpoint of kind of, I just want to be British. I just want to be accepted. I just want to be seen as a peer. And I think you can do it on your own terms. That whole desperation to fit in was kind of what I saw around me. And I thought, yeah, you kind of have to do it on your own terms, really. In theatre, I've not done much theatre, but in theatre, I've never played an Asian character. On TV or film, I think I've only played Asian characters. I don't mind. I mean, that's fine. You try to find the fulfillment in whatever it is that you're doing. And so mine wasn't so much about accept me as being British. For me, it was much more about, can I express myself creatively?
That's really interesting. And with the impact that you've had in society and with the way Asians are being viewed, how do you see yourself using your influence, let's say, for future generations? What do you hope to see and achieve?
It's not an aim because I don't think that I'm important enough, really. It's going to sound really grand, but there's a Gandhian quote that comes to mind, which is, my life is my message. And I think that in a way, that's what it is. People kind of said to me or mentioned to me before about being some sort of icon or a leader for kind of, British Asians. And I kind of go, I'm just not good enough to be those, but I'm happy to talk about my journey. And if that helps somebody in any way, then that's great. The tricky thing is about being yourself, and you have to discover who you are before you can consistently be yourself. And I think if I've done anything successfully, then I think it is that I'm constantly myself all the time. I don't think I'm different to how I am with you now than I am with my parents or when I'm on set or developing an idea. I think I found a way of being consistently me. And that's taken some time. The tricky thing for anybody, actually, how do you phase out those noises of fear and doubt out of your decisions? Whether it's wanting to be accepted, whether it's wanting to be seen, whether it's wanting to be regarded in some way, are all kind of fine. There's nothing wrong with any of those. But if they are driven by guilt or fear, then I think your decision making is different. And then ultimately what you're aiming for is slightly different. And then what you end up compromising on is different. And so I think I've just got better at pushing the fears and the doubts down and allowing the creativity to come up. This was something that I said to the students at Sussex this year, actually, which has suddenly struck me post-pandemic, that I don't think there's an equivalent. I haven't found an equivalent phrase in any other language of the very English phrase, better the devil you know. And the thing is, because through, experiences I've had, the unknown has turned out to be way, way better than I expected. So I've learned to do that thing of kind of going, okay, that blank space which sits in your future, whether that be relationships, whether that be work, whether that be the world around us, is to go, well, what hasn't happened yet hasn't happened yet. So let me be open to that. Which means that in the present, my that fear of a future thing isn't then kind of driving my actions now. So that's the thing I think I've done well. And so those are the kind of things I think I can, people wanted to listen to it, I'll tell them. And at the university, when I do the graduation, I always make the point that nobody has to do anything that I'm suggesting at all. It's their lives. It's up to them. If they want to take it, that's great. If they don't want it, I'm wishing them well anyway. You know, it's not like I know best. You know, I can just tell them what I've been through and what I've done, and then it's up to them.
It's amazing that you don't recognize yourself as the impact you've had, because you are an absolute legend.
It's probably taken me 25 years to kind of understand the context in which people see Goodness Gracious Me. And I kind of go, yeah, you know, it was hugely impactful. I think to me, it's been somewhat of a disappointment that didn't open the doors to everybody, because that's what I thought would happen. I thought once you've got that example, then surely, and then after that, because I did the Kumars at number 42 after that, which was arguably bigger in terms of commercial success, in that it ran for 7 series, it was getting 4 or 5 million viewers, it went around the world. I was filming in Malaysia, and when I got off the flight, one of the stewards who hadn't been serving me, and I had a full beard at the time, as I walked past, he said, welcome to Malaysia, Mr. Kumar. And I kind of went, the beard didn't put you off? And he went, no. And so, you know, so the impact of that was huge for me personally, because it won a couple of Emmys and things like that. And yet the paucity of our representation on TV is not much better than it was. There are more Asian actors now in roles on TV, but how many of them are leading the series? You know, not that many. I mean, you've got fantastic people like Riz Ahmed, who kind of like catapulted and jumped that. But in terms of a leading character or leading characters on TV, still not that many, you know, and that's something about society and particularly, you know, certainly post-Brexit, there's been that pushback anyway about what British means. And, you know, people who regularly kind of say, well, you know, they only make up 10% of so they should be 10% on TV. And the thing is, then the productions respond by going, okay, we're going to have diversity, so let's have some sort of people of color in the cast. But I think until it's our stories, and I think that's what Goodness Gracious Me was, that's what Kumar's was, that's what Indian Doctor was, that I was heavily involved in creating. Those were our stories, but they weren't exclusive. They found broader audiences. So that, I think that's kind of an issue still for me. I mean, I'm lucky. We got recommissioned to Series 6 for Unforgotten, second longest series I've done now. But that's written by a white guy who's kind of like, you know, written a British Asian character with not many of the sort of Asian traits. So it's a much more mainstream character. But you know, it's still me and still looks like me, and his name is still Sunil. So it's kind of, you know, for me, it's keeping that honesty there. So I'm not playing, you know, Bob or something.
So much progress has been made as well, but there's still room for even more progress.
Yeah, I'll give you an analogy, actually. I did a doc a few years ago where I went to Alabama. I was doing a piece on Martin Luther King, and I interviewed a guy in New York who was, you know, a peer of Martin Luther King and marched with him. And I said to him, we were in Harlem somewhere, I was interviewing him. And I said to him, look, if you knew Martin Luther King really well, I said, if Martin Luther King was here today and he looked at, you know, where the Black community in America had got to, what would he think? And he said to me, he said, if Martin Luther King was alive today, I said, yeah. And he said, he saw everything that was going on. And I said, yeah. He said, he'd have a heart attack and die. And it was, you know, it was an amusing response, but actually you'd think that in 1964 in America, when the kind of Civil Rights Act was passed by Lyndon B. Johnson, Black people had got the vote for the first time in many, many places. And you think if that's the case in 1964, you would think within 10 years that there would be some sort of level playing field. And the fact that, you know, you could end up in the 21st century and still see that disparity was the thing that makes me, as I say, hugely grand comparison, and probably an unfair one. But if, as some of you have done, if you kind of watched Goodness Gracious Me and seen it be a success, you'd imagine in 10 years that there would be, a plethora of shows on TV, that kind of 3, 4, 5 shows that may have kind of like accessed the British Asian experience and turned it into a more kind of mainstream accepted thing. But we didn't. I think where we have seen a difference, and this is because they have cited it, are people like Riz Ahmed has kind of said that Goodness Gracious Me was fundamental to his kind of creative journey. And Nish Kumar and Ramesh Ranganathan, they've kind of said that those were key moments where they saw someone doing that. And so there are people who kind of said that have cited it as an important moment. And it may be that that was its job. But personally, for me, on TV, I do think that the problem is, here's the thing, I think, particularly in Britain, is that there's this whole idea of, stories. Most of the fiction is stories based on truth or fantasy. And while you've got an otherness within you, then those stories are always of other people. And until they become our stories, we can't all share in them. And so the interesting thing for me is that Goodness Gracious Me and the Kumars, actually, and Indian Doctor, I mean, certainly things that I've been in that I could talk about, because they found a mainstream audience, that mainstream audience didn't say, oh, this is about them. They were able to, because they like the characters or because they like the stories or whatever, it became their stories, became all our stories. And emotions are universal. And so I think that, see, now I'm thinking about it, now going back to Goodness Gracious Me, certainly all the characters that I came up with personally were all based on some fundamental truth. It was a character I'd seen or I'd encountered, and that's what I based it on. I wasn't very good at coming up with really big caricatures. And I think that has been, I think, at the heart of everything I've done. Everything I've done is about playing with those preconceptions. In sketch terms, if you've got a sort of, guru, Maharishi type, then make him utterly ignorant, make him the opposite of what people kind of say. The idea behind the Bunga Muffins, the Init boys, was to have them be actually more intellectual, but not being able to express it. So they would talk about sort of things that were way beyond their depth, because them simply talking about girls and hip hop would have been the obvious thing. And so that, I think that's been at the heart of everything I've done. And so, on a personal level, you can only try to fulfill what your creative urges are. And that's all you can do, really, because I think there isn't a set plan or a template for success. Maybe there is, maybe I'm just unaware of it, but I don't think there is. So you have to forge your own path, and you have to kind of find some joy in that, as opposed to being tied to the outcomes all the time. If I don't reach this level within my job, then I'm a failure. Not really. I mean, it's kind of what you're aiming for. If that's all you were aiming for, then yeah, probably. It's like kind of, people who tie their happiness to money. I think you'll never be happy, because one day you got it, another day you haven't. Unless you make more, you're not happy. And so to me, that's a kind of crazy way of living. Some people do live their lives that way. So yeah, it comes down to the individual. I think I just worked out, I think, what makes me happy. And I think if you're in the creative field, then I think it is about creating. It's not necessarily about everybody saying this is brilliant. It's about having the opportunity to do it and to be able to do it. Everything beyond that is a bonus, really, I think.
So you talked about sort of challenging the stereotypes there, and also how forging your own path, because I think every creative has something different to offer. And as you say, by trying to copy somebody else's creative journey, by doing that, you won't be creating your own stuff. That's really inspiring advice. And what Anil and I are trying to do is really speak to the people like yourselves who have done so well, so successful, and just tap into that insight. And one of the common themes is that there is no apparent formula. What we want to try and do is really encourage emerging creatives to say, actually, it is possible to have a viable, successful career, and really bring to light people like you who've done so well. So they've got role models and really, really good, solid examples. And today you really help answering the question so honestly. And what's really come across is how humble you've been as well.
Yes, that was the plan. To come across with massive humility. No, that's very kind of you to say. I think that, look, there is something at the heart of what I do and what we all do, actually. Rakesh, I will be looking at your stuff. I know how good you are. And the thing is that also I know that to be accepted in any of the worlds and the fields that we've chosen is not easy, because there's just a lot of competition. There's a competition for attention, which is really hard. I know that you've done it as a woman, and as a woman of color, that is so hard. I see that all the time. And so, it's whatever you've done, brilliantly, and you've done it in your own way. And I think the tricky thing, and you're right, Rakesh, about you can't copy someone else's journey. I don't know how other people do it. And if you can take little bits of that, then you make your own bespoke journey. It'll always be your journey. I think working out who you are as an individual, I think, is a lifetime's journey, because each experience teaches you, and each new experience you go, well, I didn't know that. Whether it's dealing with kind of something really positive, or whether it's dealing with grief, or any of those things will kind of inform your own story and will possibly change it. And so, that whole thing about, as I said, I can only tell people what I've been through and the things that I've learned through it. And then if people find that useful, then that's great. And if they don't, and they find their own way, that's even better. The sheer fact that I know that the three of us, or me with any one of you two, could come up with an idea that I could never have come up with on my own, to me is absolutely magical. And I love that collaboration. I would happily sit down with either of you to talk through an idea, because it's not one I've come up with. I might contribute to it. It might be a spark, but it won't be the idea. So I constantly love that. And that's what I'm looking for in, all of the creative things that I do, are those moments, because that's when you're kind of free of anything. You're not then thinking about how much money will this make, or will I win an award, or will I be nominated for something. You're absolutely in the moment of the idea. And that's a joyous place to be. It really is, for me, because at that moment, stuff like ambition and money and structure and reputation, but they're immaterial at that moment. Those things may come off of it, they may not. But the joy of that moment is something that is so exciting. And also, the other thing that I learned to do was to absolutely work out why I was saying yes to a job or no to a job. And if it's the money, if the money's great, then that's the reason I'm doing it. That's fine. I've got to pay bills. But once I've done that, I will not be defending that as great art, or that they didn't give me any lines, or I was just in the back of shot. It's not the reason I did it. Conversely, I've also done jobs where the money was terrible because I wanted to work with somebody, or because it was a character I wanted to explore. At which point, I'm not going to be complaining about the money. Not the reason I did it. I've said no to jobs simply because, my son's 17 now, but particularly when he was little, we tried to tag team. So there was one responsible parent. Well, it was either a responsible parent or me at home. And so I turned down loads of jobs because Mira was working, because I didn't want my kid to be on his own. I've not regretted a single one of those. Whether those went on to be huge successes for somebody or not, immaterial to me. I knew why I turned it down. If things then change, and the circumstances have changed, I don't go, oh, well, if I'd known that, I didn't know that. That's why I took that decision. So I'm not hung up on those kind of regrets about what could have been. It's meaningless to me. It's kind of look forward all the time. But those two things, I think, the magic of collaboration and talking to you guys, I mean, now is, this is great. This is an experience. This is a moment for me. I'm really enjoying it. And it's kind of like, that's it. That's all it is. There's beauty in the moment. And that's what I'm constantly trying to find. Okay, I'm going to go off on another tangent, but it is who I am. I am Mr. Tangent. So the first doc series I ever did was for Channel 4. I came up with a title, to be honest, first. And then I thought, that's such a good title. What could that be? So I came up with Position Impossible. And I thought, History of the Kama Sutra. That's what I'm going to do. So Channel 4 doc was 3 1 hours that I did. And one of the things that was interesting about that as a doc was again, because I thought, well, Kama Sutra, people are all going to go, oh yeah, we know what this is. And it was absolutely the reverse of that. It was kind of, let's see when it came about. Why did it come about? How did it make its way to the West? Is it still relevant? And within that, the bit of the Kama Sutra that everybody knows and it's famous for is about 20% of the book. And 80% of it is about how to be a good citizen and how to woo. And one of the things that the book said was that here are the ways that you can hug and how you can embrace and how you can kiss. Well, here's a whole load of choices. This is not about getting to the next base. This is about hug because that moment of the hug is a beautiful thing, right? Kiss, not so you can get someone into bed. Kiss because the kiss is the ultimate moment. And I thought that's what it is. It's about not necessarily pre-linking things. And so having the beauty of the moment is something that I've tried to kind of be more conscious about. And like most things, if you're conscious about it for long enough, then it just becomes habit. It's like, being polite. It just becomes who you are. And so that's the other thing I tried to do within my creative journey, is to kind of go, this moment of having the idea and this moment of writing or this moment of performing, it's everything right now.
You're obviously brilliant, but I think the fact that you're authentic and that's what you've stayed true to, and that, because obviously people will have seen you on screen for years and years, and for them to feel like actually you've stayed true to who you are in everything you've done, I think that's just really nice.
Well, if we can link that to them giving me cash, then I think we've sorted everything. As I said, I think fundamentally, I don't think I'm any different to who I was at 17. I'm just a lot more confident and a little clearer about the elements that add positivity to my life. And the converse is that you also get rid of, toxicity, particularly through people. And you want to be there for them, but also after a while, you kind of go, actually, do you know what? You're kind of like an emotional vampire and your needs are so great that actually I'm doing damage to myself and damage to people around me. And that's a really difficult decision sometimes to be able to go, actually, I've got to step away from you because I know that you're in need, but I've just become a nursemaid and that's not who I am. There was a girlfriend that I had once who said something incredibly wise, actually, when we split up. She said, look, we both really, we get on and we enjoy each other's company. But she said, I don't think you want this relationship to go any further at the moment. And maybe both of us are standing in the way of the right person to come along. Until we split up, neither of us is going to meet that right person. And I thought that was so wise. It's really stayed with me ever since. That actually, sometimes you do have to go, actually, this might be a bit painful, but the really honest thing to do is to, with compassion, not with bitterness and nastiness, is to step away because you go, well, for both of us, you might just then be open to the experience that's going to fulfill you. Yeah. And again, it's fear that makes you hang on to some things like that. And as I said, that's the only thing. I was not confident through my teens or my 20s and even most of my 30s, actually. But I think I found what confidence meant fairly late on. I was 34 when I started, goodness gracious me. So the other thing is, I was a Buddha then. I mean, even more Buddha now. That's the other thing. If you are creative, that doesn't really stop. And I would have always been creative, but it's that whole thing of once you work out what's important to you, don't think it's too late. It may not be a job that gives you that fulfillment, but it's never too late to kind of access the creative part of you that is your soul. The rest of it is engineering. The rest of it in terms of what you do commercially, the work you do. Yeah. It's all really important, of course. But I think your creative expression, I think everybody needs to have an outlet for it. And it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a job.
So we've talked about Kama Sutra, we've talked about your ex-girlfriend. So your wife, what's it been like being married to Mira and having two creatives in the house?
We know what it's like to kind of be out of work and to be chasing work, to be working on something for months, if not years, and then it falls apart. So it's very useful in that sense. And it just means, like we've been having now, with, these kind of conversations just are conversation. They just come up when they come up. And that's really fulfilling. we're both kind of individuals. You know, she's got her journey and what she wants to get out of it and what she does with it, and which is not the same as mine. You know, one of the other things is that, you know, when you start at 34, all those notions that I would have had at 21 of fame and awards, I didn't have. At 34, I just thought, God, if I can make a living out of this, that's the most extraordinary thing in the world. Those are the things that came to me slightly later. And I suppose it means that when Mia and I have things that we have to deal with, we've got two slightly different viewpoints based on experiences that we can throw into the mix. But, you know, I mean, let's face it, she is the talented one in our house. It's not me. It's you're talking to the wrong person. You know, her accomplishments speak for themselves. So interestingly, we don't write together because I think there is, for each of us, the thought of someone else not laughing at the joke you've written, or, you know, between us, is just too much to take. You know, we kind of go, all right, even if you don't laugh at it, I think millions of people will. Although we love working with it, you know, acting with each other is great. But yeah, we don't write together particularly. We'll run ideas past each other and stuff like that.
Your entire journey really has been about collaboration and how, you know, with knitting, and then the fact that you love sparking ideas with people. So I suppose just a comment on the importance of collaboration, particularly when you're talking to upcoming artists, creatives, and what you would say to that.
It's really simply that I know that I don't have all the ideas. Alan Alda, who's an actor who's in MASH and who's a good friend, he said once in one of his speeches, the importance of hearing someone out is that someone may be wrong in your eyes about every single thing in the world, except the one thing that you didn't know that's going to change your life for the better. Are you going to hear them out? That is at the heart of collaboration, is that, of course, you have your ideas. But as I said, you know, the magic of it is we can have an idea that I could never have come up with on my own. And the other thing I was going to say that about the competition, I absolutely know that my success, for want of a better term, or my contentedness has never been at or because of someone else's misfortune. Even if it's a competition, you know, your competition is about you doing your best. It's not about beating someone. That is how the structure of the competition works. That's their box that's being ticked. It's just about you kind of being as good as you can. I think it hopefully makes you a kinder person, but also it means you're not hooking your success based on someone else's failure. And so I've never reveled in other people kind of not getting a job. If I've got a job that I wanted, that's fantastic. If I don't get it, then fine. Someone else got it. I hope they're a nice person, because that's their journey. So I kind of disconnected from that part of it quite early on. And I know that people were very competitive with me because they kind of just said so. I remember someone saying to me at a party once, goodness gracious me, came up to me, this guy, and he said, you know what, my cousin's funnier than you. You're not that funny. And I said, well, then your cousin should get his own show at the BBC. Because, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure your cousin is funnier than me. I've never met him, but let's just all accept he's funnier than me. Why hasn't he got his own show? And then he just walked off. And it was kind of like, wow, okay. His put down of me was designed to make him feel better. And I've just never done that. It's kind of, it's pointless. It's a pointless expulsion of energy. When you could have used that same energy on your own happiness. I mean, it's kind of like, why would you then kind of like use it in competing with someone else? It's not like you've got limitless energy. You get knackered at the end of the day and you've got to go to bed. So within that time, that bit of positive energy that you have, you can point it in a direction of your choosing.
What an insightful, deep and wide-ranging conversation with a pillar of the creative world in Britain.
We are so grateful to Sanjeev Bhaskar OBE for his time, honest insights and for trusting us with his story.
If you're enjoying this series, share your comments and give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts.
A special thank you to the Queen Elizabeth II Commonwealth Trust for championing our aim of inspiring the next generation of talent.
We're delighted to share that next you're going to hear from pioneering music producer Rishi Rich, whose song Dance With You, featuring Jay Sean and Juggy D, catapulted them to the top of the pop stage and UK's singles chart, marking a significant moment for British Asian music. We'll be bringing you his story.
The next episode is out in a fortnight. Do subscribe on your preferred podcast platform to be notified when it is released.